Alright, so Oda Sensei slipped the history of the Rocks pirates right into Loki's flashback. It's clear that the Rocks Xebec is the pirate who had huge impact on both the world government and Blackbeard. The two major forces Luffy will probably face in the final battle, so it makes total sense for his backstory to the reveal now. One Piece is known for having long flashbacks, and honestly, some people tend to drop off during these parts. After the Marineford War, for example, a lot of readers lost interest when the story dived into the Luffy's childhood, but that flashback introduced Sabo, Luffy's second brother, his mother figure, the Dam, and even hinted at Luffy's dream, so it was full of key into for the future of the story. This time though, the flashback is happening right near the end of the series, so it feels more like a direct bridge to the final showdown. That's probably why Oda Sensei decided to go too deep into the history of the Rocks pirate. In fact, we've heard that the Elbaf arc wasn't even originally planned, which means maybe he didn't plan to explore rocks in this much detail either. Anyway, in this video, I'm going to give you a deep analysis of rocks from the perspective of someone reading the original Japanese version of One Piece. Even though nowadays we can easily read the series across different languages, translating from Japanese to English is still structurally difficult. That's because Japanese uses 3 writing systems at once, and even single words can have multiple layers of interpretation. This makes the language perfect for wordplay, and it's one reason why manga has evolved the way it has. Because of that, I made a separate video on another channel that breaks down about the basic Japanese language the simplest way possible. If you are interested, check the description. I put the link there. So first, Rocks came up with plan to injure Rocky in order to lure Harald back to Elbaf. He must have known that the child is a parent's greatest weakness, like Dragon said before. And when he did that, he uses a sword. What caused people attention this time was the phrase Rocks no Kengi, Rock's sword technique. Lately, I've noticed that the more people are paying close attention to the Japanese wording, maybe thanks to the influence of a channel like Dawn Dusk.
Of course it is, you idiot.
I know, just kidding. Now, let's clear this up. The word Kengi in Japanese refers to the sword technique or general sword skills. Just because that word is used doesn't mean Rocks is on the same level as Mihawk or anything like that. It simply means his sword style involves something that looks more like a massive hammer or even cannon blast. Actually, a similar kind of description was used before, like when Zoro pound cannon was explained. And it was revealed that 56 years ago, during the Rebellion, Rocks kidnapped the 5 kings and actually made it all the way to Im's Room of Flowers. But the big question is, did Rocks know about Im's existence from the first beginning? What's important here is that at some point, Rocks apparently told Im that he was a follower of Davy Jones. To put it simply, I believe Davy Jones was a pirate who lived 800 years ago, a rival to Joy Boy. So in other words, the will to create a free world was passed down from Joy Boy to Roger, and now to Luffy, while the desire to rule the world was passed down Davy Jones to Rocks, and now to Blackbeard. I've actually talked before on Dawn Dusk channel about the connection between Davy Jones, Rocks, and Blackbeard. So if you want to full breakdown, check out that video. And by the way, I've got some even more interesting Davy Jones theories coming in this week's Dawn Dusk channel, so stay tuned for that too. Now, when Rocks was leaving the Room of Flowers, he turned to Im and said, 俺は戻ってくるぜ、ここへ. I'll be back, right here. The phrase, ここへ, right here, was clearly emphasized, and I think that because it carried 2 meanings. The first one is the obvious one. His return after gaining more power to defeat Im. But the second meaning is deeper. Right here refers to the very top of the world. a declaration that he'd come back to claim the title of king of the world. Plus, the person standing beside him during that scene was most likely Gunko-chan. If that's the case, and this happened 56 years ago, then it means Gunko, like the five elders, hasn't aged at all. It also suggests that the Gunko has memories from another past, meaning her mind has probably been altered or even brainwashed by Imu. In other words, her role as Imu's close aide might not just be about loyalty, it could be about keeping the brainwashing active. By the way, that reveille took place 56 years ago, which means Brook would have been 34 years old at that time. The rumor parades didn't enter the Grand Line until 4 years later, 52 years ago. And before that, Brook was living in Kingdom somewhere in the West Blue, so it's possible he met Gunko back then. And that she later got caught up in some kind of incident that led her being taken to Marijoa, where she was renamed Mama Ear. Instantly, that same year, 52 years ago, is when Roger was still being called a rookie. If we assume that when Roger invited Rayleigh and officially started his crew, that would make Roger about 25 years old at the time. We don't know much about what Roger was doing before he became a pirate, but maybe after hearing about the Rock's incident in some way, and he made up his mind to turn the world upside down his own way. After that, it seems Rock started gathering powerful crewmates through the Davy Bug fight, DBF. Now Davy Bug fight are all about stealing either crew members or flags, but at the time, Rox wasn't flying away flag. He was purely focused on gathering or recruiting strong fighters. What really stands out is this one line. He had yet to raise a flag. It was just a gathering of akuto, which means villains. That word akuto, villains, is interesting. It's not the usual word used for pirate in One Piece. But there is one other time it was used when talking about oars. Moria described oars like this. He built a nation of Akuto, villains, by dragging entire islands back as his own territory. That's the legend of the land-pulling giant, Kunibiki Densetsu. So maybe Oars also used Davy Bug fight to recruit other criminals and build his crew. It wouldn't be surprising if Rox, knowing that legend, copied the idea, using the same method to build his own army and continuing to target Harold, who carries the blood of the ancient giants. Actually, according to Shamrock, the New World was once ruled by the giants of Elbaf, so Oars country. The country of Akuto, villains people's country, might be connected to that too. 8 years later, 48 years ago, Rox came to Elbaf, still trying to recruit Harold into his crew. And this is where a full picture of the money-making scheme that being hinted at finally comes into focus. Their real target was Hachinos. Apparently, Hachinos was originally the prison island. Its other name is Pirate Island, a place where the most dangerous criminals, the kind that regular prisons couldn't handle, were exiled from different countries. By the way, that punishment, Shimanagashi, in English, island exile, is form of punishment where criminals are sent away to remote islands far from the main island. And did you know this kind of punishment also exists elsewhere in the One Piece world? In Skypiea, there's a version called Kumonagashi, or Cloud Exile. That's probably a sign that there was once cultural exchange between the Skypiea and the Blue Sea below. Now back to Hachinos. Apparently the island has gold mines hidden beneath it, and that immediately brings to mind two other places, Wano-kuni and Shandora. According to Gyukimaru, Wano-kuni was once known as the Land of Gold, and Shandora was once home to the legendary City of Gold. So maybe some of that gold originally came from Hachinos. It might have been transported to those other locations long ago. As time passed, gold veins were discovered on Hachinos, and criminals who had been exiled there banded together, and with help from underground organizations, they ended up amassing a huge fortune. When the world government tried to take control of that island, they realized it was packed with powerful criminals. Getting close would be incredibly dangerous. That's when Rock stepped in. He came up with a plan to negotiate with the world government. The idea was this. He'd offer to take back the pirate island from the criminals, and in return, the world government would pay him. Then, the moment he got the money, he crushed the world government and claimed the island for himself. That way, Rocks would get the money from the world government and the Hachinos, and he and his crew could split the wealth of the pirate island among themselves. After that, Hachinos would came under the full control of the Rocks pirate, and together with the criminals there, they'd build what he called Pirate Paradise, Rakuen. But there's something that doesn't quite add up. Robin once said that the Davy Jones fight was the game originated from the Pirate's Paradise, Pirate Island, a place where pirates gathered and played this strange competition. For a while, I assumed she was talking about Hachinos, but now it seems that's not the case, because in this arc, we find out that Davy Jones fight existed before Rock's era. So Rocks didn't invent it, he just used it to gather strong allies. And at the time, Hachinos still wasn't a pirate paradise. Which means the original Pirate Paradise Island, where the Davy Jones fight was born, must be a different place entirely. Personally, I think I know where it might be. It's that island Buggy ended up on when he mistakenly thought it was where Captain John's treasure was hidden. I believe he mistook that place for Hachinos, but it's actually a different island located in the first half of the Grand Line, and that's important because the first half of Grand Line is nicknamed Paradise. So maybe that island is the true pirate paradise, the place where the Davy Jones fight was born and where pirates of the past once gathered. And over time, their legend is what gave that part of the sea the name Paradise. Alright, let's take a look at the members of the Rocks Pirate who appeared this chapter. First up is Kinjishi no Shiki, Golden Lion Shiki. His title was listed as Gokudo. Now, if you pop that into Google Translate, it will usually come out as Yakuza, but that's not quite accurate. The word Gokudo originally meant someone who follows the path of Ninkyo, a kind of chivalrous code. It was also used in Buddhism to refer to someone who had mastered the path of Buddhist teachings. In that context, Gokudosha was actually the positive term used to describe high-ranking monks. So it doesn't necessarily have a negative connection. In fact, it's worth noting that Oda Sensei originally considered Shiki to be one of the Navy admirals in the early drafts. That makes me think there's a deeper backstory behind Shiki, something more than just a stereotypical gangster. The fact that Oda Sensei chose Gokudo instead of simply calling him a Yakuza might suggest there's a richer, more nuanced character history there. Well, probably never hear the full story in main series, but it might be a fun question to ask in SBS. Why did you go with Gokudo instead of Yakuza for Shiki? For contrast, Yakuza actually comes from the term that means useless or no good, so it tends to carry a more negative tone. Next up is Miss Bakim, and her title back then was Science Thief. Later on, we hear her described as a freeloader of maths and self-proclaimed scientist. So clearly, she's always had an interest in science. It looks like she joined Rocks Pirate because she liked his plan and shared his goals. And in more recent years, we've seen her hunting down former Whitebeard pirate with Weevil in the search of Whitebeard's inheritance, which makes it clear that her obsession with money hasn't changed one bit. Next up is Marlon. His title is Don, which translates to boss or chief, The same title used for Qinzhao, Don Qinzhao, or Sai, Don Sai, the head of the Happo Suigun. Since the West Blue is known as the sea full of gang families, it's likely Marlon comes from one of those clans. I mean, gang clans. Interestingly, someone from the East Blue also holds this title, Don Creek. And we've actually seen the glimpse of Creek on Hachinos recently, so there might be some kind of connection between them. Here's a fun little detail. Marlon's name sounds a lot like marron, the French word for chestnut. And Don Creek's name starts with kuri in Japanese, which means the chestnut in Japanese. That got me thinking, what if one of Marlon's ancestors traveled to Wano country long ago? It might connect back to that cover story hinting at the hero born West Blue and raised in Ringo, the snowy region of Wano. If that's the case, maybe one of Marlon's descendants left Wano with the Shimotsuki family and settled in the East Blue, and Don Creek was born from that line. That would actually make a lot of sense. Another possibility, based on his jawline and the fact that he smokes cigars, is that might be related to Shiryu. If you're curious about the connection between Shiryu and Wano Kuni, I actually talked about it in another video on Dawn Dusk channel, so feel free to check it out. Next up, we finally got to see Ochoku in the flesh. He was apparently taken down by Blackbeard during the Rocky Pot incident, but before that, he was the boss of the pirate island. And his design kind of gives off a Kaibu and Koibu vibe, doesn't it? He was known as the pirate cult leader, Kaizoku Kyoso. And this word, Kyoso, cult leader, and in Japanese, cult leader usually refers to someone who forms a religion or a sect. When Kaibu first introduced, he did that whole dramatic praying thing, so it wouldn't be surprising if he was inspired by Ochoku. Also, Ochoku's official title back when he ruled Pirate Island was Teitoku, which means Admiral. But sounds similar in Japanese. That's the same title Blackbeard uses now, Kurohige Kaizokudan Teitoku. 2 years ago, Teach was still being called Captain, like Sencho, but after the time skip, he started going by Teitoku, Admiral, and it became official enough that Luffy corrected this muscle for calling him Sencho, which means captain by mistake. So yeah, that title probably came from Ochoku, another thing Blackbeard took after claiming Pirate Island Hachinos. And finally, let's talk about Ganzui. He probably the same guy that the zombie we saw among the general zombie back in Thriller-berg. Now, there isn't the actual word Ganzui in Japanese, but there's similar sounding word Gonzui. That's a type of saltwater catfish known for being poisonous. It's not commonly eaten, but in Japan's Boso Peninsula, it's sometimes used in miso soup. Funny enough, its whisker-like features kind of resemble Ganzui's beard. It looks like he was involved in smuggling, and maybe he was smuggling sea kings or rare marine creatures. Speaking of sea kings, they're known to live in the Calm Belt, and there's one unusual nation located in the Calm Belt, Amazon Lily. Since sea kings are apparently eaten like normal food there, maybe Ganzui was involved in smuggling them out of the Calm Belt, which could have led to the connection with Gloriosa, and eventually brought her into the Rock's pirate as well. Now, when Rock declared his ambition to become the king of the world, Herald had this to say, 敵が巨大すぎるな、世界だぞ. That's enemy's way too big. You are talking about the whole world. The word 巨大, which means big, can refer to the little size, like giants, but in this case, as Herald comments shows, it's more about the influence, about the sheer scale of what Rocks was trying to take on. Another time that word comes up in One Piece is in the phrase the Great Kingdom, 巨大な王国. And we still don't know was that kingdom literally enormous in size, Or was it great in the sense that it massive power and influence like the current world government? That mystery hasn't been solved yet, but bit by bit, we're getting closer to the truth. And honestly, at the pace things are going, we might finally learn the secret of the Great Kingdom sometime next year. Alright, so that wraps up my breakdown of chapter 1155 based on the Japanese version of One Piece. There's still a lot I didn't get to cover here, so I'll be sharing the more detailed Japanese analysis and some extra theories over on my page. And of course, we'll be posting more and more videos on Dawn Dusk channel as I explained, so don't miss them. Also, I offer private Japanese lesson as well as translation and marketing work in Japanese. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out via Instagram or email. Anyway, see you in the next video.